through this neighborhood in East Knoxville, and the houses hide the history of a time when real horsepower was off to the races.
When you mention it, how it's an oval, then people say, oh, I see. And I get that many times.
The man who owned the track that's now the Speedway Circle neighborhood was the ultimate underdog.
Cal Johnson, coming up from slavery to be one of the wealthiest black men in the state of Tennessee, is just a fascinating story.
Cal Johnson was born a slave of the McClung family in 1844. As a young boy, he worked on the farm and became an expert horseman, just like his dad.
His father, Cupid Johnson, was a winning jockey himself. So horse racing was in Cal Johnson's DNA.
After the Civil War, Johnson bought horses, not for racing, but to pull wagons when he found work digging through death.
He got a federal contract to dig up the bodies of soldiers who'd been killed in the war. And he used that money to open several saloons in downtown Knoxville.
Cal Johnson opened the Poplar Log Saloon at the corner of Vine and Gay Street. He served blacks and whites, was known as a polite and respectable man.
Well, it was Cal Johnson's nature to be a gentleman.
Johnson's Tavern eventually changed its name to the Lone Tree Saloon because it had the only tree left on Gay Street. Money was growing on trees for Johnson with his saloons and real estate. He could afford to buy the animals he adored as a child.
He owned one of the finest strings of racehorses in the South. He owned the mare Lynette, the horse George Condit, won in the Chicago World's Fair.
Then Johnson bought the finest tracks for them to race in East Tennessee.
He purchased what became Speedway Circle from the East Tennessee Fair Association.
The tracks held horse races and even the first airplane flight in Knoxville. Johnson was a man so respected, voters elected him to city council. But his string of success at business was saddled after a tough turn of the century. In 1907, Tennessee banned gambling on horse races and also outlawed liquor.
Much of his income was destroyed by those two state laws. Thank goodness he had his real estate to fall back on.
Johnson continued making money on real estate and buying and selling fine racehorses. And he donated vast amounts of the money he made to charity. So much so, the city named a public park in his honor. When Johnson reached the finish line of life, he had no children. Most of his estate, worth $500,000, eventually went to the church.
So he was very civic-minded, gave his money to worthy causes.
The city park, a recreation center, and one of the buildings in downtown Knoxville still bears his name. And this remarkable story of a slave who found the fast track to big business left a lasting impression on the shape of a neighborhood at Speedway Circle.
That's the telling story for me from Cal Johnson, that I was a slave, but yet look at what I achieved. Look at what I contributed to my community.
In East Knoxville, Jim Matheny, WBIR 10 News.